Hey there, kids and chess family. I've got something really special for you today. I recently had the opportunity to speak with one of my mentors and one of the greatest chess coaches I know, USCF master Dan Heisman. And Mr. Heisman has been teaching chess for the better part of 50 years and has written over a dozen chess books, including a wonderful primer for parents called A Parent's Guide to Chess. It's an invaluable resource and is the only chess book of its kind. So sit back and enjoy, and I'm really proud to present this one-of-a-kind interview with the man who inspired me to become a chess coach, USCF master Dan Heisman. How long have you been teaching chess, Dan?
Well, let's see. I remember giving a course at the Neighborhood Development Center when I was working there so that would be early 70s. And then I gave a course where I met my friend Arthur Mitchell right after I became the Philadelphia champion in 73. So if you don't include like funzy teaching, probably almost 50 years.
Wow. So you've seen quite a bit. Safe to say.
Yeah, well, I hate to say it, but I wrote my first chess book 46 years ago.
Wow. That's incredible. I think that's amazing. I don't know why you hate to say that, but I guess
because the only way you can say you wrote your first chess book 46 years ago is if you started when you were negative and you still are young.
Well, you've gotten better with age, I can say. So it's done you well. You've written about it a little, I know, but talk about what it was like to coach your own son. And how that differs from coaching other students, because I know a lot of parents like to get into coaching their own kids sometimes with soccer or baseball and things like that, and chess is one of them too. But what was that like?
All right, so let me clarify your question. Are you talking about coaching my son, or are you coaching about someone coaching their son?
Well, I'm hoping maybe somebody can draw some insights from what you have to say about coaching your own son.
My son got up to about 1800, and he took exactly zero coaching. He would never let me teach him anything. He was like, "Go away, Dad. I'm not interested. It's your thing. I'm not that interested. I just want to play and have fun. I don't want to learn anything."
Wow.
So
all right.
That's about it. I'm sure my son, who's now 37, can back that up. But basically, once in a blue moon, he would come to me and say, "Let me show you my game," and I would almost fall over because he would never do that. So I didn't really. It's funny because if you compare me with Sunil Viramontri, Sunil had his two sons, and obviously his younger son was very interested in being coached and took as much coaching as possible, and now he's one of the top 20 players in the world, Hikaru Nakamura. And my son, who was very talented, wanted no coaching at all, never wanted anything, didn't care that his father was a chess coach. And, he undoubtedly would have been a much, much, much better player if he had actually wanted to try.
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes for just about anything. If you're interested in it and you dive in, you're going to get better at it quicker and probably go further with it than anything. That you don't have so much of an interest in. So he was kind of a casual player.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a 12th grader, I think he finished maybe 11th in the national K through 12th grade championship.
Okay, well,
as I said, he got his rating up over 1800 at his peak. I think right now I think he played one or two tournaments in the last 20 years, but I think his rating is hovering around 1700 now. And actually, he plays some speed chess online, and he's pretty good. He uses those smarts, but he's never really studied chess. He doesn't have a lot of chess knowledge. He has a lot of chess skill, but not very well developed.
Well, and you've talked and written both about that as well, chess knowledge versus chess skill. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit, because I think there's a disconnect there in a lot of people's minds where they think that learning more about chess is going to make them better, but that's not necessarily the case.
Right. So if we broadly make a line down the middle and we say knowledge is on this side and everything else, skills and traits and stuff, is on the other side, then the big four for knowledge would be opening knowledge, end-game knowledge for exact end games like king and pawn against king or king and queen against king or Lucena position. Principles like, if you see a good move, don't play it. Look for a better one, or move every piece once before you move any piece twice unless there's a tactic in the opening. And finally, tactical patterns where you study tactics and you say, oh, I recognize this tactic. He's pinned. What you do is you attack it with a pawn and then you win it. That seems to be a high percentage of chess, but it's not. I had a TV show where we talked about this, and I think the consensus was that knowledge was about 1/3 of chess, and the other 2/3 were skills. What kind of skills are we talking about? Analytical skills, evaluation skills. Analytical skills include things like visualization, where you look ahead and you can see what the board would look like 2 moves from now. Perseverance, which is one of the very most important skills in chess. Determination, stamina, the ability to learn from your losses, the ability to bounce back from your losses, the ability to take coaching. These are all skills and traits, and about 2/3 of chess is probably skills and traits, where analysis and evaluation are the top 2. And anybody who doesn't agree with me, I simply say, go to any big tournament and look at the tournament games, and you'll see 11-year-olds rated 1900 playing 50-year-olds rated 1600. And the 11-year-olds rated 1900 will have read 3 or 4 chess books in their lives, and the 50-year-olds would have read 200 chess books in their lives. And the 1600 50-year-old will know a lot more about openings. He'll probably get a much better opening than the 11-year-old, unless the 11-year-old happens to be a specialist in openings. But then what will happen is the game will get a little complicated, and the 11-year-old will blow the 1600 50-year-old right off the board. And then after the game, if you listen to them go over the game, the 11-year-old will say, well, here you went here, but you can't do that because now I do this, and I win a pawn, and then your queen side falls apart. And the 50-year-old will say, yeah, I didn't see that, because he doesn't have the analytical skills that the 11-year-old has. And of course, that 11-year-old who's rated 1900, maybe when he's 14 or 15, will be a master. But the point is, the reason why someone who's read 200 chess books is beating someone who read 2 or 3 is because that knowledge only takes them so far. It gives them the first 7 book moves. It helps them if they get into a Lucena position. It helps them recognize a few tactics. But when it comes to actually figuring out complicated things, to figure out what's the best move, the person who's real good at analysis and evaluation is going to blow away the guys who can't do that as well.
So then what would be the big key to improving one's analysis and improving one's visualization? What do you think is kind of the best way to go about doing that if somebody's interested in growing like that?
Okay, so improving visualization is a different subject than improving general analysis skills. The best way to get better at analysis is to grab people who are really good by the shoulder and say, let's analyze. Go over my game, go over your game. Let's go over a puzzle. Let's go over a position. Let's go over a Grandmaster game. Talk to me about how you look at these positions, how you figure out the moves, because I want to read your mind and I want to hear what you're doing so I can do it too, because I want to know, why are you looking at that move and not that other move? And how do you know when to stop? And how do you know when to look further? And, just pick their brains. So the best thing to do is to grab people who analyze really well and analyze with them. And of course, if you look at the history of almost every great chess player, or every top, let's say 50 player in the world right now, they didn't lock themselves in a closet and try to memorize books. What they did is they went out there and they got trainers and they got playing partners and they played in 1 million tournaments and they analyzed with their opponents. You go out there and you analyze with good players, whether it's your trainer or your opponent or a good guy at your chess club, you just analyze with them. What else could you do? You can get well-annotated chess books where the author is understanding. He's trying to teach you how to play chess better. I call those instructive anthologies, and read what the author has to say there. An instructive anthology is much different than a normal game book like Anatoly Karpov's Best Games or my 60 Memorable Games by Fischer, where they're just trying to tell you what happened in the game, and they're not really trying to teach you how to play better chess. So in instructive anthologies, the most basic one is Logical Chess Move by Irving Chernev.
Yes.
I have one called The World's Most Instructive Amateur Game Book. McDonald has a 5-volume series, which starts with a book called Chess, The Art of Logical Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
These are all really good books. They don't necessarily teach you how to analyze better. They give you the information on what is being analyzed and how to analyze it. And then from that information, you sort of build that up. But learning how to analyze better is probably the single number one skill in chess, and getting out there and analyzing with good players is really what you need to do. That's what my son wouldn't do with me. He didn't want to analyze games with me.
Yeah.
Visualization is one of the key analytical skills. You can't say if I go here and he goes there and I go here and he goes there, then I should do this. No matter how good your chess logic is, if you can't see what the position would look like if those four moves were played.
Sure.
So you have to be able to visualize. 99% of the best players in the world, I'm sure, learn how to visualize by playing in a million tournaments and playing really, really slowly and trying to move the pieces in their head. A lot of my students have the idea that visualization is a 0-1 skill. By that, I mean they either can or they can't. And since they can't, they don't. And since they don't, they're terrible. I tell them, no, practice may not make perfect on visualization, but practice will make you better. I tell them, think of it this way. 0 is like where you are the first day you learn how to play chess, and 100 is the unattainable perfect skill that no human would have, and Gary Kasparov and Bobby Fischer and Magnus Carlsen are 99.2 or something. Well, maybe right now, after playing chess for a few years and not trying to play slow chess, a lot of people think slow chess is 15-minute chess, which is ridiculous.
Right.
They play a lot of fast chess. Maybe their visualization skills are up to like a 12 or a 17 out of 100. Okay, but that doesn't mean if they play slow and they try to visualize in their head and they work on it and they work on it and they work on it, they don't slowly get better. Yes, you're going to move up from being a 12 or a 17 to a 23 to a 29 to a 35. Yeah, maybe you're never going to get anywhere near that 99.2, but you're going to be a lot better if you practice it. Now, that's the one thing you need to do is have your brain practice visualization. The other way, which I think almost no good chess player has done, but which is available to people who want to try to shortcut, is to go online and just simply Google chess visualization exercises. And you'll come up with a whole bunch of websites where they have exercises that they claim will help you shortcut that process and help you visualize better. So there's all kinds of different exercises that people claim will make you better. Some people use the color of the squares. I'm not a big believer in that, but some people do that. Some people have you look ahead 2 moves before you solve a tactic. I think they call play that forward. And there's all kinds of websites, some of which are fee paid, some of which are free, which purport that if you do their exercises, it'll help you get better at visualization. So you can try these exercises. I have a book called Studying Chess Made Easy by Grandmaster Soltis, which has a visualization exercise in there. You can work on those things, but everything starts with you have to want to get better, and you have to realize that if you work at it, you might be able to get better. Again, not everybody's going to be in 99.2, but it's not a 0-1 thing where, people say to me, oh, I'm no good, I'm a 0, so I won't work on it. What's the point? I can't do it. That's a bad paradigm to think of when you're trying to get better at things.
Sure. Yeah. So then here, sometimes it's fun to play with extremes. What if you could only give one piece of chess advice to a young player? What would the one tip or the one bit of advice be that you would give?
Do what's fun and do a lot of it as much as you possibly can, but don't ignore your schoolwork.
Yes, good advice.
Yeah, it's fun. Chess has got to be fun. All the best chess players became good not because they were 3 years old and they said, I want to grow up and be a chess player and I hate chess, but I can make a good living, so I think I'll really work at it. No, they were like, wow, chess is unbelievably fun. This work that I'm doing, all these games I'm reading are fun. All these puzzles I'm doing are fun. Going to the tournaments is fun. Going over the game with my opponents is fun. Learning these openings is fun. Everything about it is fun. And, when you're dealing with kids, if it's not fun and it's a hobby, you got a problem, because it's one thing if you're trying to teach a 5th grader how to get to 6th grade in math, and you say to him, if you don't do this math, you're not going to, graduate to 6th grade, and we're going to have to keep you back in 5th grade. Well, that's different. They have to do it. They have no choice. They got to go to 6th grade.
Sure.
So they got to work on it. And chess is never like that. I've had some of my parents get mad at me because I don't teach chess that way. I can't look the kids in the eye and say, if you don't do this, something bad will happen to you. The answer is, all right, maybe the parent wants that kid to be a professional chess player, and if they don't do it, they won't be a professional chess player. But the kid's not going to be a professional chess player if that stuff isn't fun for them anyway. It's got to be fun to begin with. So it's not like teaching chemistry and math that way. It's a hobby, and what you're doing has got to be fun. Most kids when I teach them, especially the younger kids, the ones below, let's say, age 9, they don't want you to, quote, teach them chess. They want to play chess. And while they're playing, they don't mind if you talk to them and you teach them and you say, why did you make, but they want to play. They don't want to be taught. Now I have adults, I tell my adults, I don't want to play with you. That's a waste of your lesson time, It's like stealing your money to play a game against you. You should play against someone who's a peer, and then we'll look at the game and we'll talk about it and stuff. You don't want to pay me to think while you're thinking. You don't want to pay me to have me think. You want to do all those things in between lessons. But for a little kid, almost all little kids, they want to play. So, you have to make the learning fun. And for them, for a great majority of the kids, if they're not playing chess, it's not fun. Now, sure, you can take what you're teaching them and make it into a puzzle. Like, for instance, here's a couple ways to do that. One way would be you put a puzzle up on the board, and then you kind of ask questions about the puzzle and challenge the class to see, can you figure this out? Can you figure that out? You sort of make the puzzle into a game. The other way you can do it is sort of play half the class against the other half. You put something on the board you want them to learn, and you say, let's see if this side of the class can do better than that side of the class. So again, you're making it into a kind of a game. Mm-hmm. And they can tolerate that kind of learning. But if you just say, today I'm going to teach you Lucena. If they get this position, then you have to go here. If you don't go here, he's going to go here and get a draw, get a win. So therefore, you have to go here and here. And then he can't try to go here because this is a draw. And, try to remember that. Well, very, very few percentage of kids when they're younger are interested in that kind of stuff. And maybe the very top kids, maybe Fabiano Caruana will tell you, oh, yes, when I was 9, I thought I was fascinated by that stuff. And I loved it when they taught me. But obviously, he's much more the exception than the rule.
Sure. So talking about the type of games to play, you mentioned 15-minute games, and people think that's slow chess. And part of that is just the advent of not only the internet, but just Blitz chess, I think, is attractive, especially to kids, because it's fast. And it's almost like I want to say almost like a sport, in the sense that things happen a lot faster as opposed to the slow time control. But it's obviously very important. Talk about the difference there and why it's important to play slow chess for a kid's development.
Okay, so there's several issues here. First of all, I didn't say anything about Blitz chess. I said 15 minutes.
No, right.
It's much slower than Blitz chess. I actually am a big advocate of Blitz chess, and so are a lot of teachers.
I love it too.
People quote me on the internet. I've had people quote me on the internet as saying, speed chess is bad for you. And I said, I've never said that in my entire life, because I think speed chess is a lot of fun. And I think it's one of the best ways to learn opening, and one of the best ways to learn time management, and one of the best ways to practice your quick tactical vision. I think speed chess does a lot of good things for you. However, intermediate chess, where you're playing, let's say, between 10 and 30 minutes for a game, that's a little different. If your speed chess is 5-minute chess and your slow chess is 15-minute chess, that's not good, because what's going to happen is you're going to get into all these really bad habits of playing these games, and you're not going to really learn how to think, because chess is a thinking game. And there's just some types of positions, let's say endgame positions, that are very critical, where you have to figure them out. You'll never see them in a book. It's just a complicated endgame position where you have to figure everything out and say, well, if my king goes over this way, can I get a queen first? Or if I go over that way, can I stop him from getting a queen? And it takes, I've had positions in those kind of positions where as a master, it takes me 20 minutes to figure it out. Well, if you're playing a 15-minute games, you're not going to take 20 minutes on one move to figure it out. That's what happens when you play, 40, 90 or 40 and 120 with a 30-second increment, or, these really slow games. Then you can get positions where you can try to learn to figure things out, and you can work on your visualization. You can't do much visualization in 15 minutes. It's almost impossible. If we do a little math, the average game is 40 moves. 15 minutes is 15 times 60, which is 900 seconds. 900 divided by 40 is like 22 and a half. So you have 22 and a half seconds per move. Well, if you see a good move, look for a better one. 22 and a half seconds, you're lucky if you can make sure your move is safe, let's look for a better one that's also safe. And certainly if you get into an end game where it's critical which way your king goes and you have to figure it out, and it takes a master several minutes to do that, for someone who's not that good, they may not be able to figure it out at all, much less if you give them 10 minutes. But if you tell them, oh, your clock's running, you only have 3 minutes left to finish the game, they're just going to guess and move one way or the other, and that's the way they're always going to play, and they're never going to learn how to play right. I tell everybody, let's look at who all the best Blitz players are in the world, or even the best 15-minute players. I mean, pick any time limit you want. Who are they?
Currently?
Sure.
Yeah, let's see. I'm on Lee Chess quite a bit, so the top guys are all grandmasters that are up in that list.
Yes. Gee, what a surprise! All the best speed players are also happen to be all the best slow players. Now let's figure out, how did they get that way? Well, it's true. Fabiano Caruana probably played a lot of speed games when he was young. Nakamura was one of the great speed chess players of all time. Yes, they played a lot of speed chess. But I saw Fabiano here in Philadelphia playing in our tournaments. He lived in New York, and we're 90 miles away, and he would come down for the World Open or the National Chess Congress. So Fabiano would come down here to Philadelphia and play in the World Open or the National Chess Congress. Nakamura would come down for the World Open, National Chess Congress. Even my son would play World Open, National Chess. These guys played a million slow tournaments where they had 2 hours for the first 40 moves, and then got another hour to finish the game. And in fact, Botvinnik, I guess, was famous for saying he played one speed chess in his life. He was on a train to a tournament, and the other grandmasters talked him into playing one speed game. So he did. But other than that, he never played a speed game in his life. So I am not sitting here telling people not to play speed chess. I'm just telling them, don't play speed chess exclusively, and don't make your non-speed chess games your 15-minute games. You're just not going to learn how to play good chess. I tell people, at the very minimum, play 30 minutes with a 5-second increment. And I have to really complain about the servers, chess.com and ICC and all those guys. They don't create buttons with increments on them. They like, the slowest button, people complain to me, is 30-0. And then, of course, somebody hits the button and they get paired with someone 700 points below them or 700 points above them. It's a terrible way to find chess on the internet. The best way to find chess on the internet is make friends on the internet. Go on these servers, talk to people on like chess.com, join the Slow Chess League or the Dan Heisman Learning Center. Post up on there every day for 3 weeks. Hey, I'm looking for people to play. Message me, please. I'm looking for people in this rating range to play slow games. Make friends and then schedule games with them. And once you schedule a game with someone on the servers, you can hit the custom button and hit any time limit you want. So instead of playing 30-0, if you have an hour, play 30-10 or something where you don't have that race condition. Don't play with the 0 increments. And if possible, play something slower. 45-45 is a very popular league chess time on the internet. And 45-45 is not 40-2, but it's plenty slower, 10 times slower than a 15-0 game. So that, you have a chance to learn how to think and do time management and really get into some of these positions that take a lot of time, because I have students making moves in positions in 10 seconds where I look at it and go, I'm a master. I couldn't figure that out in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And you're moving in 10 seconds. And they go, well, yeah, I only had 14 minutes left on the clock, so I couldn't really look at it for 4 or 5 minutes. I'd run out of time.
Gotcha, yeah. So you've got to have the time in the first place to be able to spend it.
Right. Now, a lot of people play long time control games, and then they play them fast. They play 45-45 games, and they end the game with 73 minutes on their clock because they make all their moves in 10 seconds. And they tell me, oh, I played a 45-45 game. And I'm like, no, you played a 45-45 time limit, but you played it like as if it was a 210 game.
Yeah.
And, you made all your moves in 10 seconds, and then at the end of the game, you had 73 minutes left. Well, I always tell people, think of a chess game, like taking an essay test. If I gave you 2 hours for an essay, you wouldn't hand it in 10 minutes and tell the teacher, this is a great 2 paragraphs I wrote. The teacher would say, well, you're right. It's a very good 2 paragraphs. I'll give you a D- because you had the right idea. But I gave you 2 hours. I was expecting about 4 or 5 pages. That's what I've gotten historically when I give it these 2-hour essays, and you gave me half a page in 10 minutes. So I'm going to take it off. Well, every doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, they all know that when you take an essay test, you're supposed to hand it in when they say pencils down. Well, if I give you 2 hours to play a chess game, you're supposed to be making your last move when you have almost no time on your clock. That means you tried your best. If you play a game and I give you 2 hours, let's say you have 2 hours with a 5-second increment, which is very low, and you play the game and you finish with 37 seconds left, well, then you couldn't have done much better unless you sat there twiddling your thumbs waiting for your clock to go down. On the other hand, if you finish the game and the game goes 72 moves and you still have an hour and 47 minutes left, then I could pretty much look you in the eye and say, I don't think you tried your best, because most humans could do a lot better if they took a little more time than played every move in 5 or 10 seconds, especially when they have it. So the best way to measure as a coach whether your students are trying their best is to look at their clock and see what the clock is telling you. So unless you have a student who's trying to fake you out by just sitting there and twiddling their thumbs, and I once had one of those, but most of them aren't that way. You look at the clock. In fact, I used to have kids come out of the room when I wasn't allowed in the room. And the first thing, they would come out of the room and I'd say, how much time did you have left on your clock? And how much time did your opponent have left on your clock? I wouldn't even ask them whether they won or they lost, because if they said, well, we played a 30-minute game and I had 2 minutes left on my clock and my opponent had 17 minutes left on his clock, I'd say, very good, and then I'd say, how'd you do? On the other hand, if they came out in 3 minutes after they started and they go, I won, I'd be like, well, how many moves did you play? And they go, 23. And I'd be like, 23? I'd say, how much time did you use? 2 minutes. How much time did they use? 2 minutes. Okay, they just went bup, 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 and the game was over, and they're all very proud they won. And I'm proud they won, but in the long run, you're trying to get them to be a better chess player. The results in the short run are not as important as what you're learning. In fact, I always tell people, don't be afraid of losing a chess game. Be afraid of playing a game and not learning anything. And the example I give is, suppose you could play 10 games. And you could play 10 times against someone who's around as good as you are, maybe slightly better. And for some reason, you're going to lose all 10. And each time it's going to take 40 moves and it's going to be excruciating losses. Or you can play 10 games where you scholar mate someone who just learned how to play today. Which one would you rather do? Well, almost everybody picks the 10 excruciating losses, even though they hate the losses, because at least it's fun. They tried. It's an interesting game. The 10 scholars mates is like saying, well, gee, you're an adult. Let's see if you can beat up a 3-year-old. It's not, there's nothing to it. What's the point of playing 10 games where you scholar mate someone 10 games in a row? So you're trying to learn things. You're trying to have fun and learn things. If you have fun and you learn things, the wins will come. It's just like people who try to manipulate their rating.
Yeah.
I tell them, they're like, I drew with someone 17 points higher than me, so I gained 0.07 points in rating. I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I go, the way to improve your rating is to improve your playing strength. And if you improve your playing strength and you play better, your rating will go up. Otherwise, if you let's say you figure out a way to manipulate your rating and you could gain 50 rating points even though you don't get any better. Well, you're just going to lose them right back unless you quit forever and retire, because you manipulated the system for 50 rating points, but you're not really 50 rating points stronger. Well, if you're not 50 rating points stronger, your rating is going to go down 50 points as you play. Your rating is always just going to follow your playing strength. So what's the point of trying to manipulate your rating? It just doesn't make any sense. But when parents and kids find out about ratings, they go crazy. And I always say to a lot of the parents, you'd be better off if you pretended the rating system never existed. You wouldn't give people, you won't give people draws based on their rating. You won't do all these stupid things. I'm not going to play in this tournament because most of the kids in this tournament are lower rated than me, and I can't gain a lot of rating points. So therefore, I'm not going to play in the tournament, because if I can't generate a lot of rating points, what's the point of playing? I'm like, you're never going to be a good player with that kind of attitude.
No.
Manipulating the rating system. Play in the tournament, beat all those really weak kids, and learn something. Now, if there's another tournament down the block where everybody's a lot better and you could learn a lot more, sure, go to that. But if you have a choice of not playing at all or playing against the weaker kids and beating them up, well, play against the weaker kids. Learn how to beat them, help them get better, and maybe you'll learn a couple things about openings that the weak kids played against you that you didn't know. But if you sit there and say, I'm going to protect my rating, it just doesn't work. This thinking about the rating drives me crazy. As I said, I wish they had invented the rating system, but put it in the background so that people didn't see it. and then rate people in the background for other purposes, but don't like pair people with their ratings. And then people become like rating God people, the ratings are the gods and so on. And I understand if you're trying to get your kid invited to, the international tournament in Europe, because your kid's an international player and he needs to be 2,300 and he's 2,294, you want to get those 6 points so you can get invited to the tournament. But that's like 0.01% of the kids, if
Sure.
not smaller. For most people, that just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and me too. And it's funny that you talk about the pairings, because one of the things when I was playing actively in tournaments that I always tried to do, which is sometimes very difficult and sometimes easier depending on the tournament, is not look at my opponent's rating at all. And I would just go look and try and figure out what board I am and what color I am and go. And then half the time the other person would sit down across from me and say, "What's your rating?" And then we start talking about this. And so I'm with you on that. And, ratings, are simply a reflection of playing strength. But I think where the difficulty comes in is as people get their ego tied to their rating, similar to wins and losses in chess. And one of the reasons I think a lot of players don't like to study their own games that they lose is the ego factor. And they don't want to go back over that because it represents pain. To some extent. So how can a parent or a child on their own, but really, talking about parental guidance more than anything, how can a parent encourage a student to want to learn from their mistakes and their own games? And maybe, would it help to sit down with them and go over that? Or is there any kind of advice you have as far as that goes?
Well, obviously, a lot has to do with people's temperament.
Of course.
I tell people, and this is not a direct answer to your question. Suppose we have a measure of how painful losses are for you, whereas 0 is, it doesn't matter at all. It's just a game. Who cares? Win or lose, it's all the same thing. And 100 is, if I lose, I'm going to shoot myself. I'm never going to play again. I can't stand to lose. Losing is my whole existence. And if I lose, I'm out of here. Okay. If that's the scale, where do you think the grandmasters fall?
I'd say they've got to be closer to 100 than 0, that's for sure. Maybe 60, 70, 80, somewhere in there, probably 70 or 80.
Everybody, 60 to 90, 60 to 80. Almost everybody gives that answer because it's the obvious answer. They hate to lose, but they don't hate to lose so much that they're not going to learn from their losses. They're not 95s and 100s. They're not that kind of thing.
That doesn't discourage them.
Right. Now, suppose you have someone like my son where he's a lot closer to 0. He's not a 0. He wants to win, but he's not a 70 or 80. Like my son got back rank mated in tournaments about 10 times before he stopped. I got back rank mated once when I was in 7th grade, and I said, I'm never doing that again. And I never did, except maybe in a 1-0 speed game or something. But my son would get back rank mated, and I would say to him, Dylan, I'd say, don't you want to learn so you don't do this? And he'd be like, Dad, relax. It's just a game. So he's a lot closer to 0. He's a type B personality. I'm the type A personality.
Sure.
He's the one who won't get the ulcers, So in fact, I talk about this I wrote a book called Everyone's Second Chess Book. And if you have the first edition, I highly recommend it to everybody to get the second edition because we greatly expanded it. And it's a really good guide for, it's not as good a guide for parents as my book, a guide for chess parents, but it's a good, book with a lot of good general advice for starting out. And I started, in the introduction, I talk about one of my students who was a very strong young player. He was when he was 11, he was maybe 1,700. He and I were talking at a tournament while my son was playing, and I give the position that my son was in the introduction. And I show you how my son was setting himself up to be back rank mated. And I was explaining to my student what my son was going to do and how he was going to get back rank mated. And my student, who was 1,700, was like incredulous that I was like explaining to him how my son was thinking. And sure enough, my son walked right into the back rank mate a couple moves later and lost because that's not what my son was doing. And my son was a couple years younger. He was probably only 8 or 9 at the time. He would never do that today. But still, that's the kind of thing. So a lot of it has to do with, getting back to your question, a lot of it has to do with temperament. If you're like my son and you want them to learn from your losses and stuff, he doesn't want to learn from his losses, not because they're so painful, but just because it's just a game and who cares and why should I go over the game? He's got the opposite problem. If you have someone who's really, really, really painful at losses, you really have to work with them as a parent and a coach to get them over that. Because I tell everybody, suppose you play in a lot of tournaments. What percentage of the games are you going to win and lose?
Depending on your ability, it could be anything, but you're not going to win them all. You're not going to win them all, that's for sure.
Take into consideration that almost all tournaments are Swiss system until you get to be really, really good when they play round robins. If you're playing Swiss systems, what does the Swiss system do?
It pairs you with the players that either lost the round before or won the round before, and you get to, in the standings.
Players that have the same score that you do.
Correct. Yeah. So
in the long run, where is your percentage going to go toward?
You're probably looking towards 50%.
Exactly. So what happens is if you're 1100, you play a lot of 1100s and you win about 50% of your games. And if you're 1700, you play a lot of 1700s and you win 50% of your games. Now, it's true when you go to the state championships and they let the 1700s play the 1100s in the first two rounds. Sure, the 1700s are going to end up 4-1 and the 1100s will end up 1, 2, and 3. But if they go to another tournament where you're playing sections and they're playing with people around your level, they're going to be back to 500 again. So what happens is you're going to end up around 500. Well, if you're going to round up around 500, you got to get used to that, because unless you're one of the top kids in the country or one of the very worst kids in the country where you're going to win almost all your games or lose almost all your games, almost everybody in the middle, no matter where they are in the middle, are going to win close to 50% of their games. Sure, the 1700s are going to win more than 50% and the 1100s are going to win, let's say, less, depending on what age we're talking about. And if you're 400, you're going to win, certainly less than 50. But you're going to have to get used to that. And if you think that losing is such a terrible thing, and I tell everybody, look, there's lots of bad things in life, like getting old. Look at me. But losing a chess game is not one of them. It's like, yes, you got to learn from it. And I tell people stories about games I lost and how I took it and stuff, and it doesn't really change their personality. But I try to give them perspective on the fact you're going to lose a lot of games. If you don't like it, you got the wrong sport. The way chess is played is you're going to lose a lot, even when you're a pretty good player. Magnus Carlsen loses a lot of games each year because he plays a lot of games each year, and he's playing the top players in the world, and he wins a lot more than he loses. But, he loses a lot of games, and he doesn't go hide in the closet. And I'm sure when he was growing up, he was winning most of his games too, but he probably lost a lot of games then when he wasn't quite as good. And, that's one of the things you have to do to become a good player is to realize what you're trying to do when you're playing is learn and have fun. And if the wins come, that's great. That's a bonus. And if the losses come, well, you learn more from your losses sometimes than from your wins. So that can be a minor good part of losing, even though it's very minor.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't take someone who's 100 and bring them down to a 30. It's never going to happen. You might take them as 100 on that scale we were talking about and bring them down to a 90 or an 80 where at least they can play. And you might take a 30 and bring them up to a 40 or 50 or 60. You're not going to move someone tremendously from one end to the other. That's just not possible.
Sure, yeah.
But if you have a kid who's intelligent and their kid is wise and they understand things at a more of an adult level, then once you tell them, hey, look, you're trying to win, you want to win. When you win, that's fun. When you lose, that's less fun. But when you lose, it's in the past. It's over. That's all you can do is learn from it. Yes, it hurts for a couple of minutes. Okay, next game. That's the way it's got to be. You work with your kid from the start. Now, 3- and 4-year-olds hate to lose, and parents lose to them on purpose so they won't lose and they won't cry and everything.
Yeah.
But by the time they get to be 5 or 6, they really have to start to get over that, because it's going to be hard to really compete in a chess level when you get to be those ages where you are playing the other kids at 6, 7, 8, where if you lose and you're holding a tantrum or you're not going to play, or you're going to cry every time you lose, all right, maybe once or twice when it's especially painful, we understand. But if this is what you're going to do every game, then people don't want to play with you, and you're not going to get to be very good because you're going to hold yourself up that way. And I think most kids who really cry and scream when they're 3 and 4 get over it by the time they're 6 and 7, but there's a few that don't, and that's a problem. And I'm not going to tell the parents, so go out and cut 2 inches of carrot and mix it with 3 inches of celery, and then pour a little green beans on top of it, and that's going to make a kid who's gets all upset. Then tomorrow they're going to be great because that's the formula. It doesn't work that way. You have to talk to people, and if they're willing and receptive to what you're saying, and you can work with them, then you've got a chance to move them a little bit in the right direction to get them in that range where you want them to be. But there's no magic that's going to work every time for every person, and that's true with a lot of things. Just like when I teach chess, a lot of people think I'm the greatest teacher since sliced bread, and then I have other people who go like, "Ooh, why would I want to take lessons from you?" And the chemistry isn't there. And
Sure.
when you deal with a lot of people and you deal with the public, one thing you learn is you're not going to please everybody all the time. If you try, if I say, "Oh, I'm going to get really upset every time I run into a student who doesn't think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread," well, then I'm going to walk around shaking my head a lot because it's just not going to happen. And I tell that on my website, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to adjust a little bit to you as best I can, but I have a certain sense of humor. I have a certain way of doing things, and I can change those things to some extent, but I'm not going to change my sense of humor per se. As you can tell from the interview, I like to talk. I'm not a monotonic talker. I don't say this is it and this is it. Remember that I'm always like, "Oh no, you did that, ah!" And then some people are like, "Oh, you yelled at me," and I'm like, "No, I was like surprised you did that." Oh, I went, "Oh," and they're like, "Oh, you can't do that with me. I'm sorry, I can't take lessons with you." In fact, when I tell the story, older people know Mr. Bill from Saturday Night Live.
Of course. Yeah.
Mr. Bill would go, "Oh no," and they would throw him out the window, or they'd crush him with a steamroller. And I had one student who just hated doubled pawns. He hated them with a passion, and he would rather lose a pawn than double his pawns. And he said, I said, "Well, why don't you do this? You could win a queen or something." And he goes, "I can't do that. I would double my pawns." And I went, "Oh no, not double pawns." I did my Mr. Bill, and he says, "You yelled at me." And I said, "Well, I raised the decibel of my talking by saying, 'Oh no,' but did you ever hear Mr. Bill on Saturday Night Live?" He goes, "No." And I'm like, "Well, Mr. Bill would go, 'Oh no,' when something bad would happen." And I was just doing my Mr. Bill imitation. He goes, "I'm sorry, but you yelled at me, and I can never take a lesson from you again." So like, oh well. So now 20 years later, I can tell that story and say, I did Mr. Bill and I lost the student. Oh well.
Well, you were his
student. If I had known ahead of time, I wouldn't have done it, but I did it, and nothing I can do about it now. Just like nothing I can do about my losses now. I can look back and say, "Oh, that loss to Mike Shahadi 50 years ago was really painful." But I'm over it.
Yeah. Well, you were that student's sluggo, it sounds like. Anybody who knows Mr. Bill gets that one. One more for you real quick, if you got time, Dan. And I'd appreciate just a quick, just an overview or a treatise on the life skills that kids can learn, or that anybody can learn from chess, not just kids, but the kinds of things I know that parents especially, though, gravitate toward chess thinking almost in some cases that it's this magic bullet for education and for science and math, and all these test scores are good. So let's slow our roll on that a little bit and just talk, though, about how the translation happens, and because it's not automatic. You can't just set a person in front of a chessboard and all of a sudden they're going to magically grow their brain. They've got to put effort in.
Okay, so this is a long subject, and people have done studies on this because it's important, because they want to know, is it worth funding chess in schools and stuff like that, because
Sure.
We want to know what the effect is. And wow, where to start? Let's start a little bit with, let's start a little bit about fairness. In chess, if you take a kid who's really smart, but he doesn't study chess and he doesn't play a lot of chess, and you play him against the kid who has average intelligence, who studies a lot of chess and plays a lot of chess and tries to learn chess and learns from his losses, the average kid is going to beat the smart kid. There's just no doubt about it. Now, if they had exact same training, Would the smart kid have done better? Well, yes, we would think that smart helps you in chess that way. But chess is very fair that way. You kind of get out what you put in. And most things in life, I hate to say it, are not nearly that fair. You know,
That's true.
in fact, because there's so little luck in chess, chess is even more fair than other sports a lot of times because,
Sure.
you know, you could play, I like to play backgammon, but sometimes I outplay my opponents, but they rolled double six on the last roll and they beat me anyway.
Sure.
You know, life in general, one of the things you have to teach kids is life is always not always fair. You do the best you can, and then somebody else gets the job because they're the nephew of the guy who's hiring you. Or, you know, we could go on all day about things in life that aren't fair that, you know, and they've done studies on success for people that went to Harvard that did really well in life versus people who went to Harvard who didn't do so well in life. And what was the difference? It's really fascinating stuff. Chess is pretty fair. And a lot of kids, especially, let's say, inner city kids or poor kids, where they really see that life isn't fair, they don't want to give effort because they think I could work and they're going to do, it's not fair. They're going to treat me differently anyway. And, you know, what's the point of being good because, you know, you don't get rewarded for it. And then they get into chess. And what they find is that chess is very fair, that if they work at it, they do get better and they can beat the kids who didn't work at it. And if they take their time on every move, they can play better moves than if they don't take their time. And the things that they learn that makes them better at chess helps them win games. So the correlations are much higher in chess than they are in real life. And it helps restore their sense of fairness. Now, if you're saying to me, but what if you have a kid who's not an inner city kid who thinks that life is a little more fair than maybe someone who doesn't, how would it help them? And the answer is, well, of course, I'm just looking at a very, very narrow answer to your question. For sure, one of the things about chess is even though they think grandmasters look 30 moves ahead and plan 30 moves ahead, that's ridiculous. As Andy Soltis writes in his book, 90% of the grandmasters wouldn't look more than 2.5 moves ahead.
2.5 move chess, yeah.
It's not necessary or even possible. There are some positions in like in an end game, like at the end of the Searching for Bobby Fischer movie, where they set up the puzzle where you have to see like 8 moves ahead to see who queens first and whether you get a skewer at the end. But when you're playing chess, you have to kind of figure out, if I do something, what's the result of my actions and what will happen and how can I plan it so that even if my opponent's trying to stop me, I can try to do something that will get some positive out of it. And you do those things in life too, but little kids don't do those things as much. They tend to be more instant gratification, as you said earlier about the speed games. And chess kind of helps you with the part of your brain that's trying to say, if I do X, what's the result of X, and how can I work on what's going to happen based on X? And
causal relationships.
In life we do that a lot with probabilities. Chess has less probabilities, but even in chess you're dealing with probabilities because you don't know what your opponent's going to do, and based on how good he is, there's a certain chance he'll do this or that. Like, for instance, beginners make silly threats. You know, they'll move out a bishop and threaten a queen, even though the queen could just take off the bishop for free, with the idea that if the other guy doesn't see the bishop threatening my queen, I can win this queen and I can win the game. So you learn to make silly threats when you're a beginner, and they work, and then you get this positive reinforcement that silly threats is the way to play chess, when, of course, that's a really bad habit to get into, and you don't want to make silly threats. So that's one bad thing you learn when you're a beginner. But most of the things are not that way. Most of the things are the consequences, so that they say that when you know, adults learn, they already know these kind of things, but when kids learn, a lot of times they don't take things in life where they can kind of think ahead and think what they're doing and how it affects what's going to happen. And in chess, it kind of gives them that very steady rock there where those things do happen over and over and over again, and it helps your skills on doing those kind of things. So that's one thing. Believe it or not, another thing that chess helps is teamwork. And chess isn't a team game, but almost all kids play like for Scholastic clubs, and their team goes to the states and the nationals and everything. And what they quickly learn is we can help each other learn openings. We can root for each other. We can play games against each other and learn from each other's mistakes. we can strategize and say, gee, if we can just draw 3 games in this round, we can get at least the 10th place trophy, things like that. So just like other team sports, which might require being tall like basketball or strong and fast like football or good hand-eye coordination like baseball, chess could take kids who maybe don't have any of those things, and they really learn a lot about teamwork when they're playing in the school situations, because there's a lot of team involved in chess, even though chess is an individual sport. So we could go on and on and on. I've just mentioned just a couple things off the top of my head in terms of that. But, chess is very good for you. It's got a, proactive mental thing that you're doing. That's why they say it's good for older people. It's always good to have proactive mental activities and proactive physical activities. So they say you don't want to sit around with your mental activities. You don't want to sit around and just watch movies all day or watch TV all day. That's just the passive input of information. With chess, it's a proactive output of information. So when you're playing chess or doing crossword puzzles or whatever, and that's good for adults, it's good for kids too. We don't want to overlook the fact that proactive mental things are good for kids. Now, kids are used to doing homework and doing schoolwork, which is a proactive mental activity too. But here it's proactive fun, and we don't want everything proactive to seem like work. So, those kind of things are good for you too. And we can just, as I said, we can go on and on. And again, it gets back to what I said earlier, which is chess can be extremely good for certain kids because of their receptiveness and what they learn and what they are. And for other kids, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. And, it's not going to help them nearly as much. But that'd be true about everything.
Sure, yeah.
People are people, and we've got all kinds. And, I think chess is good for people of all ages, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's the best thing you could ever do. And, sit in front of a computer all day or sit in front of a board all day, and that's way better than going out and getting going on the cross country team or something. Well, that's not true. You want to lead a nice balanced life, and occasionally you get kids who, they're one of the top chess kids in the world, and they don't have a very balanced life, but then they'll make millions of dollars playing chess when they get older, hopefully. But then there's the 99.9999% of us who get to sit here and talk in videos and work with the parents and, do all the normal stuff. And, for us, chess is a hobby, and, it's a very good hobby. And, it's not the only game that's a good hobby. I play other games that are also good. But it's fairly inexpensive, which is nice. I mean, you don't have to set up a whole basketball court to play. You can buy a set and a board for, less than $10, and a school can get a discount from the USCF or whatever and buy 1 million boards and sets and clocks and have a whole chess team relatively inexpensively. So it's a fairly inexpensive sport, and it's a good time spent. It's not like a time that you're going and then you just say, oh, I just wasted half an hour. It's good. I wouldn't be a chess teacher if I didn't think that chess was good for you. I couldn't look people in the eye and say, yes, I teach chess to make money, but it's actually really bad for you. You shouldn't be playing this. But I don't want to tell you that because I want to make some more money.
Yeah, right.
You have to believe in it, to do it. And, I've done other things in my life that I also believed in, but, this chess is one of them.
Yeah. Well, I was happy you led with that comparison of the average, so to speak, intelligence kid who plays and studies and wants to learn, as opposed to the quote unquote smart kid. Because I think there's a perception that chess is for smart people and chess is for geniuses. And I still run into that sometimes when I talk to people. And I always tell them, chess is specialized knowledge. That's all it is. It's like put me in under a car hood. I can't fix a car engine. I don't know anything about it. I've never wanted to. So I've never gotten interested in that. And so I don't know any of the parts. I don't know what's the carburetor. I don't know. But chess is something I've spent time in. I've studied it. I want to get better at it. And so I have. And, I like to make that comparison with my parents, to kind of strike down that whole magic bullet idea that comes across, because, you can put a child who is of, I hate to, when we talk about kids, talk about smart kids and average intelligence and all that, but, realistically,
really work that way.
No, right. But, again, perception being what it is, you've got people who believe that, chess is for smart kids. or chess will make my kids smarter. And really all it is specialized knowledge. You're just talking about something that you've studied, and it could be anything. It could be science, it could be working on a car, it could be art, it could be math, but going back to, I think way at the beginning, you were talking about the interest level. And that's really, if your child is interested in it and it's fun for them and they're wanting to do it, encourage that. But if it's not for them, it's not something I feel like you should try and force a square peg into a round hole, so to speak, and sort of stick your kid in chess against their will because you think it's going to do some kind of magical thing to their brain. So I was happy to hear you kind of address that in that answer. So, I'll let you go. I really appreciate your time.
I wanted to give you one more story based on what you
said.
Said.
No, of course, please.
Label the story. So I won't give the full name of this person, but when I was in high school, our arch rival high school had a very good chess team. And there was a guy named Ricky S., who was the smartest kid in the school. And Ricky was the kind of kid, his hobby was homework. And he once got a B on a term paper because he was supposed to write a 25-page term paper, and he turned in a 100-page term paper. And the teacher graded him down a grade because the teacher said, I didn't want to read a 100-page term paper. So he got a B, but he was the smartest kid in the school, and he joined the chess team. And the other kids on the chess team were, they were obviously reasonably intelligent kids, but so Ricky joined the chess team, and Ricky was fighting for fifth board. My friend Ken Boehm, who recently passed away, was first board, and Lester Shelton was second, and Robin Busby was third, and so on. And Ricky was fighting for fifth. And the next year I came back, and Ricky wasn't on the team, even though he was still in the school. And I asked Ricky, I said, Ricky, what happened? You're not on the chess team this year. And Ricky said, yeah, I got tired of people saying to me, hey, you're the smartest kid in the school. How come you're on the only fifth board on the chess team? So he just quit rather than trying to improve, because the other kids were obviously more interested in learning chess and playing chess than Ricky was. He was interested in writing 100-page, term papers. But that's the thing. I mean, Ricky was plenty smart enough to be a better chess player, but he wasn't as interested, and that's the way it goes. And it's nothing wrong with that. I tell everybody, if you're interested in chemistry or economics or biology instead of chess, that's not bad, as long as you're doing something that's good. I'm not going to discourage you and say, put down that chemistry book, let's go play chess. People say to me, Dan, how come you haven't taught too many grandmasters? I go, well, first of all, when you have a top kid in the country, the USCF doesn't usually turn to me. They turn to the grandmasters to teach them, and that's okay. I'm not jealous. But I've had some kids who were talented enough to be grandmasters. Danny Benjamin was certainly one, and Matthew Traldi. These are brilliant kids who were terrifically good, masters when they're 12, 13 years old. Well, but Danny pretty much gave up chess when he was 14 because he was interested in like Freakonomics. And he got his PhD from Harvard in economics, and now I think he just moved to UCLA. He's a professor of economics at UCLA. And Matt Traldi won the cadet championship in San Francisco when he was 15. And then he pretty much gave up chess and so on. But these guys are all like doing stuff. Kurt Schneider, who I taught when he was 11, 12 years old, and he was a master when he was about 13. Kurt watched, do you ever see the High School Musical, that show?
It's one of my daughter's favorites.
Yeah, when he was at Yale, he watched High School Musical, and he said, I can do that. And he was at Yale, so he wrote College Musical. And luckily for him, they had already invented the YouTube. So he took he found the best singers at Yale, and he put on College Musical. You can Google it on YouTube. Huh. And he wrote it, and he directed it, and he did the whole thing, and he got on an Oprah Winfrey show and all this kind of stuff for, now he's into show business. So, that's what Kurt's doing. So we have all these people, they're very successful, but none of them wanted to continue and be a chess grandmaster. And I don't feel bad about that. I'm happy to tell you that Kurt wrote College Musical, and that, Danny's a professor at UCLA and so on. And it's like, Yeah, I'm sure if they had decided to be professional chess players, a few of these guys would have been grandmasters, but they didn't, and they're not. So I haven't coached anyone from the time they were young until they were a grandmaster. But that's going to be the way it is, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
All right, parents out there, thanks for giving me a chance to talk to you.
yeah, we appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And I know you've got a website that's got a lot of resources on it that our parents can go and check out. Is there some place to start there? Is there some place you'd recommend a parent goes first on your website?
Well, as I said earlier, I have the book Parent's Guide to Chess, which is on my book page. If they go to danheisman.com, they can kind of navigate around with the pull-down menus. I've got recommended books. I've got articles I've written for chess.com. My Chess Cafe links don't work anymore because Chess Cafe went paid. But that's about the only thing on my website that's kind of dormant. I have links to my ICC videos. I have a link to I have my YouTube channel now, which is called, it's simply Dan Heisman Chess. So if you go to YouTube and you look for the channel Dan Heisman Chess, I've got 130 instructional videos there. You know, for people that don't know me, I've written 12 chess books. I've written all kinds of stuff. I have TV shows I did for chess.com and radio shows I did for ICC, stuff like that when I was younger.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time, Dan, and have a great day, and happy chess.
Thanks. Same to you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Of course. My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.